I call this meeting of the House Preventive Health Division to order. The first item on the agenda is the roll call. Could the clerk please take the roll?
Chair Freiberg.
Present.
Freiberg present. Vice Chair Bierman.
Present.
Bierman present. Representative Grunhagen.
Present.
Grunhagen present. Representative Acom.
Present.
Acom present. Representative Abaje.
Present.
Abaje present. Representative Ackland.
Present.
Ackland present. Representative Carlson.
Present.
Carlson present. Representative Franzen. Representative Franzen. Representative Heinzman.
Present.
Heinzman present. Representative Morrison.
Morrison present.
Morrison present. Representative Pryor.
Present.
Pryor present. Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, a quorum is present. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the March 9th meeting. Vice Chair Bierman, would you like to move approval of the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move the approval of the March 9th minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. So we have 4 bills on the agenda today. They all deal with the same subject. They have been heard in the Commerce and Environment committees. So we will, so just kind of, I wanted to just give members a roadmap of how the process will work. There'll be a brief presentation of the bills by the authors, Representatives Kotyza-Witthuhn and Wazlawik. And then we will take testimony on all 4 bills since they all deal with the same subject matter. There will be some time for member questions of the testifiers at that point, but because we have 4 bills, I may limit if members to a follow-up question if there's more than one. And then we will take the bills individually. So with that, Representative
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Representative Heinzman.
Mr. Chair, this has been a theme ongoing in committees over the last some months that the chair just decides the timeline and the amount of questions and so on and so forth that are allowed to be asked. And I'm just going to mention for the public that this is precedent setting going forward. And Mr. Chair, you certainly have that discretion. I'm not arguing that. But every time a chair continues to set that standard for their committee, I'm going to rise to it because this is going to affect the legislative process ongoing into the future. Thank you for the opportunity to point that out, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Representative Heinzman. Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, would you like to just briefly describe your bill first, and then I'll have Representative Wazlawik describe hers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to be here in Preventive Health today. I know this committee deals with a really wide variety of important issues when it comes to the health of Minnesotans. And so my proposal, House File 3571, is a PFAS ban in juvenile products. So the text of the bill is pretty self-explanatory, but for those who haven't had the text up in front of them, this includes, but it's not limited to, baby or toddler pillows, bassinets, changing pads, et cetera, playpens, and on and on. And so I guess how I would like to just start briefly is that as a new parent, it's often overwhelming the sheer number of recommendations that float around both online and in so-called old wives' tales about how to best care for a newborn, and then as they grow into a toddler and a small child and a big kid. Advice from physicians or early childhood educators often provide more of a path to run on, but there is no shortage of things to be concerned about while raising children and wanting to do so to the best of our ability. This can range from the safety of cribs to sleep training, the ever-present breastfeeding or formula debate, and the concerning presence of toxic chemicals in baby products or children's toys. In short, parents or caregivers don't often know what we don't know, and this can impact parents all across socioeconomic and geographic factors. Here at the legislature, we can take steps in minimizing some of these concerns, and acting to ban PFAS in these juvenile products is a big part in that. So I know we're going to hear from a number of testifiers today. We'll hear from Representative Wazlawik, who I consider to be sort of an expert in this subject, and I will be happy to stand for questions down the line. We did have an extensive discussion when I was in the Environment Committee, about 50 minutes, if I'm remembering correctly. So hopefully we have no problem keeping within your timeline today, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn. Representative Wazlawik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for being here today to see these bills presented. Since this is my first stop here, I just want to give a little bit of background on PFAS before I dig into the details of the specific bills that I have up today. PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, are used in many consumer products, often because of their grease or water resistant properties. These chemicals are persistent in the environment, highly mobile, and some PFAS bioaccumulate in human bodies. These chemicals have no known degradation pathways in the environment, which means that they stay in surface water, groundwater, wildlife, and people's bodies, and are passed down through generations from mother to child through umbilical cord blood and breastfeeding. The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry at the CDC suggests that PFAS have been linked to pregnancy-induced hypertension and preeclampsia, liver damage, increased cholesterol, increased risk of thyroid disease, decreased antibody response to vaccines, increased risk of asthma, decreased fertility, and decreased birth weight. Evidence of harmful impacts on human health led to the phase out of older PFAS chemicals, PFOA and PFOS, but research has shown that newer generation PFAS chemicals, oftentimes known as short chain PFAS, are also problematic. These chemicals are showing up in human organs and breast milk. Research has linked exposure to these PFAS to health concerns, including hormone disruption, liver and kidney damage, and developmental and reproductive effects. A recent study showed that exposure to certain PFAS can lead to endocrine disruption in pregnant women and their fetuses. Other research has shown that there is a disproportionate transfer of certain PFAS through umbilical cord blood to newborns. Fetuses, infants, and children are particularly susceptible to the harmful effects of chemicals, toxic chemicals, including PFAS, due to their rapid growth and the complex developmental events that they undergo prenatally and then in the early years of life. In 2019, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences conducted a 28-day toxicity study comparing 7 different PFAS chemicals. These studies showed that the current used PFAS, these short chain newer generation PFAS, induce similar toxicity as the phased out PFAS that I mentioned earlier. Some have questioned why we're trying to regulate PFAS as a class of chemicals. Just want to make a few points on this. First, these chemicals have similar properties. And as mentioned earlier, recent research has shown that even the newer PFAS chemicals are linked to negative health impacts. Regulating PFAS as a class has the potential to prevent regrettable substitution, which is essentially when a chemical is substituted for another chemical very similar in structure, but we don't have a lot of information or testing that's been done on that chemical. This regulating as a class will also improve the efficiency and effectiveness of chemical management, and will encourage the selection of treatment approaches that reduce total PFAS exposure when remediating PFAS contaminated sites. It would take decades, or actually probably centuries, to test every PFAS chemical in existence. Meanwhile, these chemicals will continue to be used and continue to contaminate the environment and accumulate in our bodies. It will take a long time and a lot of money to clean up current PFAS contamination. Adding more contamination by continuing to allow the use of these chemicals will only increase the health and financial costs. I don't know about you, but I don't like being a human test subject for the chemical industry, and I don't want to be responsible for cleaning up a mess that they created. I also want to point out that the chemical industry, who has a rep testifying today in opposition to the bills, has spent millions of dollars fighting efforts on the federal level to regulate these chemicals and to require the industry to pay cleanup costs. And the reason I point this out is because there's been testimony in the past saying that we should wait for the feds to do something, but the reality is that folks are resisting changes at the federal level as well. The best way to prevent these negative health impacts that I mentioned is to prevent PFAS exposure. One way to do this is to ban the use of PFAS in consumer products that people use frequently. So today we'll be discussing three bills of mine that seek to do just that. First up is House File 2906, which bans the use of PFAS in cosmetics. In a recent study, scientists tested more than 200 cosmetics, including concealers, foundations, eye and eyebrow products, and various lip products. According to the study, 56% of foundations and eye products 48% of lip products and 47% of mascaras tested were found to contain high levels of fluorine, which is an indicator of PFAS use in a product. I want to quote one of the authors of the study, a professor of physics at Notre Dame. They said, "These results are particularly concerning when you consider the risk of exposure to the consumer combined with the size and scale of a multi-billion-dollar industry that provides these products to millions of consumers daily. There's the individual risk. These are products that are applied around the eyes and mouth with the potential for absorption through the skin or the tear duct, as well as possible inhalation or ingestion. PFAS is a persistent chemical. When it gets into the bloodstream, it stays there and accumulates. There's also the additional risk of environmental contamination associated with the manufacture and disposal of these products, which could affect many more people." Next up is House File 2907, which prohibits the use of PFAS in cookware. A lot of nonstick cookware has special coatings, including PTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene, also known by the brand name Teflon. This coating is typically made using several different PFAS chemicals. PTFE-based pan coatings can release PFAS into the environment throughout their lifespans, especially during manufacture, but also through high temperature cooking and during disposal or recycling. These coatings are also coming into direct contact with food, which people are eating, another pathway through which PFAS could get into the human body. Finally, we have House File 2952, which bans PFAS in ski wax. Research conducted in Maine, Sweden, and Norway found high levels of various PFAS chemicals in the snow near starting lines or areas where ski events were held. Researchers have also found PFAS contamination in soil with concentrations higher near these starting lines. We all know that PFAS is very mobile. It can move easily through the ground and get into the groundwater and then into the drinking water, which people then drink. Finally, just to wrap up here, I want to mention the written testimony that's been provided from many different groups. Environmental groups, Learning Disabilities Association, Zero Waste groups, and climate action groups, the Partnership on Waste and Energy, the Solid Waste Administrators, the Sierra Club, the Silent Spring Institute, and others. It's a wide variety of people who are in support of banning these toxic chemicals for a variety of health and environmental reasons. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for the opportunity to present the bills.
Thank you for your testimony, both Representatives Wazlawik and Kotyza-Witthuhn. So I have 6 people who signed up to testify on this bill. We'll take them in order. If you could please limit your testimony to 2 or 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. And also testifiers, if you could please stick around after your testimony is concluded, in case any question. We'll have a quick period for questions of testifiers after their testimony is concluded, and then as we turn to each of the different products in the 4 different bills, it's possible questions may come up specific to those products that the testifiers may be equipped to answer. So if you could just stick around for the duration of the hearing, I would appreciate it. So the first testifier on the list is Deanna White. Welcome to the committee. And after Deanna White will be Tony Quillis. So welcome to the committee, Ms. White. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg and members of the committee. My name is Deanna White. I'm the State Director for Clean Water Action, and I also serve as the Director of the Healthy Legacy Coalition, which is a health-based coalition focused on ensuring that consumer products, especially for those for children, are made without the use of toxic chemicals. I appreciate the chance to talk about these bills today. We're here in support of the 4 bills before you today. These bills are part of a larger PFAS prevention package that aims to stop the use of PFAS in a wide array of products. As I'm sure the committee knows, the best way to prevent negative health impacts from chemicals like PFAS is to eliminate their use and avoid the exposure altogether. And these bills are an important part of that puzzle. PFAS are a class of chemicals in need of immediate action based on their threats to human health and widespread pollution in our environment. There's a number of studies referenced in my written testimony, and in the interest of saving time for the committee, I won't reiterate all of them other than to say that we see over and over again in the research that the impacts of all the PFAS chains and models are significant and problematic and avoidable if we can stop the use of these toxic chemicals. PFAS are known as forever chemicals because they don't go away. They're virtually indestructible. They last a long time in the environment, and they get into the human body. Eliminating non-essential uses of PFAS was identified as a key component to prevent pollution in the Minnesota's PFAS blueprint, and we hope that the committee will agree that protecting public health and preventing PFAS pollution should be a top priority for the legislature. The bills before you today address 4 different product categories: cosmetics, cookware, ski wax, and juvenile products. As Representative Wazlawik indicated, a large array of beauty products from mascara to lip balm contain PFAS chemicals. Chemicals with PFAS pose a health risk not only to the people using them, but also to their children. According to scientific research, we found PFAS in 97% of human blood samples. These chemicals, including the new generation PFAS, have also been found in breast milk, where they pass into infants, putting their health and development at risk. House File 2906 would ensure that we are protected from future PFAS contamination through cosmetics. One of the larger market for PFAS is nonstick cookware coatings. A 2020 study, which tested 24 types of coated cookware, found the most tested nonstick cooking pans and some baking pans are coated with PFAS. Waste created by the PFAS manufacturing process has contaminated communities in Minnesota and across the country. Last year, the legislature wisely banned the use of PFAS in food packaging. Removing it from cookware is the next logical step. When it comes to ski wax, we've learned that PFAS is added to ski wax to increase speeds. And studies have shown that skiers actually have on average 45 times as many fluorocarbons in their blood as non-skiers. Research has demonstrated that PFAS migrates out of ski wax, attaching to the snow and soil underneath the ski tracks. And as the snow melts, the PFAS can contaminate the groundwater. Water systems tested in Vermont showed high levels of PFAS water contamination near local ski resorts. This is an unnecessary risk to our environment and our health, and that should be eliminated. Another bill before the,
yep,
oh,
please,
I'm sorry, am I at 2 minutes?
Yeah, you're at 3 actually, so you don't have to.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's
Just,
okay. You don't have to cut off right now, but if you could conclude in a few sentences.
Absolutely. Again, I'd reference my written testimony and just say that the market is shifting, and while that's welcome, we need strong policies to stop the widespread use of PFAS chemicals whose entire life cycle is hazardous to people and the environment. And we appreciate the actions of the legislature in the past. We hope that you'll continue this leadership by supporting the bills before you today. And apologies for going over time.
No problem. Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list is Tony Quillis, and after Tony Quillis will be Lydia Jall. Welcome to the committee. Mr. Quillis, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tony Quillis. I'm the Director of Environmental Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and I'll try and keep it under 2 minutes, Mr. Chairman, but I think I will be really close. I just want to talk about the breadth of what we're talking about today when we talk about PFAS. There's over 4,000 chemicals in the PFAS class structure. Not all of them have the same toxicological effects, and their hazard and risk profiles are different for each chemical and for each use of that chemical. There's a wide range of applications with different properties and different characteristics. There's over 6,000 uses of this chemical. Medical devices, automobiles, manufacturing, airplanes, solar panels, and cell phones are just some of the uses of it. As Representative Wazlawik pointed out, it's known for its resistance to grease, oil, water, but more importantly, provides flexibility, strength, durability, and stability to products that it's used in. There is a lot of activity ongoing right now on the federal level, as well as right here in Minnesota. EPA has a roadmap out right now where they're reviewing all effluent guidelines right now, risk assessments, and they're about to issue disposal and guidance documents. Data review has begun just on 20 of the PFAS applications. Instead of taking the whole class, they're going to take 20 of them and go through and review them. All of this action is going to take place this year and in 2023. As EPA Director Michael Reagan has made it one of his priorities. The PCA here in Minnesota has a PFAS blueprint. Besides that, the Pollution Control Agency is doing some fish tissue sampling. The Department of Administration has amended all state contracts on purchasing compostable products with PFAS. The PCA has got a draft monitoring plan out right now with requests to all permitted facilities that have air, water, and hazardous waste permits to report back on any PFAS in their facilities. At the Department of Commerce, there's a chemicals and products interagency team that's meeting to look at this issue. And then last year, the legislature created and funded a PFAS stakeholder group on wastewater and landfills, of which I'm a member and has already started meeting. Mr. Chairman and members, if there are alternatives, the industry is moving towards them, and they've proved that. But not all the products in all applications have alternatives, and all of those alternatives have not been tested or approved. Mr. Chairman, not all the PFAS that are in this chemical class have health risk values or health risk limits. This is an issue that can't be solved at the state or local level. It must be looked at in a bigger picture. In regards to the individual bills, Mr. Chairman, none of the bills contain a de minimis, none of the bills contain intentionally added language, or what I call the manufacturer retail sell-through, where there's a stop date for the manufacturer of and then a sell-through through there, Mr. Chairman. I just think we might be putting the proverbial cart before the horse here, before we see and let play out what's happening at the state and federal level. And I'm not sure if it made it into your packets or not, Mr. Chairman, but there should be a letter from the Minnesota Retailers Association that I just wanted to reference also. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your ability for me to make some comments today, and I'll stick around for any questions.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Quillis. Next up is Lydia Jall, and after Lydia Jall will be Nick Vetch. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee for discussing these important bills today. My name is Lydia Yall. I'm a PhD chemist with the Green Science Policy Institute here in support of these bills. We are a group of scientists who collaborate with government, business, academia, and other NGOs in order to reduce the usage of health-harming chemicals in everyday consumer products. Last June, we published a collaborative peer-reviewed paper on PFAS in cosmetics, the same one referenced by the representative today. Our research showed high levels of fluorine, a marker for PFAS, in more than half of 231 cosmetic products. When we tested a subset of these cosmetic products for individual PFAS chemicals, every single one contained at least 4 different PFAS, all of which are associated with a wide array of health harms. The products that were most likely to contain PFAS were waterproof mascaras, colored lip products, and foundation. These are the most likely to result in health harm because of their usage. For example, mascara is applied to the delicate eye area. People who wear lipstick inadvertently consume pounds of it throughout their lifetime, and foundation is applied across the entire face. It is unacceptable that PFAS is found in products that have such a high potential for human exposure. Furthermore, most of the detected PFAS were not even present as ingredients on the product labels. Some PFAS comes from inadvertent contamination during the manufacturing. This cross-contamination is caused by the wide and unnecessary use of PFAS that bills such as those discussed today would stop. Other PFAS are added to makeup intentionally, but are often not labeled as we found. Researchers have tested the same cosmetic products purchased in both Europe and the United States that have identical ingredients lists and found PFAS only in the products from the United States. This means that health-conscious consumers in our country cannot choose to protect themselves, which is another reason why such legislation is needed. On the day our research paper was published, the bipartisan No PFAS in Cosmetics Act was introduced in the US House and Senate. We held a press conference attended by the cosmetics industry, and our research was covered by multiple major news outlets. In the months following, even the mainstream makeup companies like Kylie Cosmetics, Sephora, and Ulta pledged that their new clean beauty brands would not contain any PFAS. We are now working with many cosmetic brands that have never intentionally used PFAS, but are now trying to remove them from their supply chains as quickly as possible. And our website page at pfascentral.org listing PFAS-free products is our most visited. What the people want is clear: to go about their lives without having to worry that the products they use are safe, especially those that are in contact with their skin every day. The science is also clear: PFAS are harmful, so why are they still used in cosmetics? While there are many PFAS with different structures and different uses, no PFAS studied have been shown to lack harm. Chemical structure determines function, but it also determines health harm, which is why banning PFAS as a class is absolutely necessary. To protect the people of Minnesota, I support House File 2906, as well as the other bills discussed today, along with bills to ban PFAS in products introduced on the national level in California, Maine, and other states. These Minnesota bills have the potential to greatly improve the health of our citizens and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Nick Vetch, and after Nick Vetch will be Sean Swearingen. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Vetch. I'm an engineer who works in the solid waste and composting industry. I'll say that all the other testifiers are extremely knowledgeable on this topic, and especially Representative Wazlawik. The main takeaway here, I would say, is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Preventing these issues in the first place by eliminating these chemicals in our consumer products is the first step to making sure that we can clean these up at some point in the environment. They're incredibly hard to remove from the environment, and they limit our ability to process waste. Compostable products are contaminated with cosmetics and materials from food processing, as well as our surface water is being contaminated by ski wax and other sources from waste products. And, I do apologize, but I've overbooked myself today, so I won't be sticking around for questions, but I would be happy to answer via email if anyone does have additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming to testify when you are able to. So next up is Sean Swearingen, and after Sean Swearingen will be Nichelle Williams-Johnson. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and I'll try and keep my testimony within the time. For the record, my name is Sean Swearingen. I'm the director for the Alliance for Telemer Chemistry Stewardship. My testimony is in opposition and will be considered and applied to each of the 4 House files today. The mission of ATCS is to promote responsible production, use, and management of fluorotelmer-based products, while also advocating for sound science and risk-based approach to regulation. As alluded to earlier, work is being done with federal regulatory agencies together, and we agree that regulation can be done effectively and collaboratively at the federal and state levels. The area of concern, as written in these measures, is the definition of PFAS, as is overly broad and not focused on specific applications of concern. The definition being utilized is a structural definition that European regulatory agencies like OECD classify as not appropriate for regulatory enforcement. The broad definition of PFAS would have widespread unintended consequences, and as written, the definition includes hundreds, if not thousands, of different chemistries. This does not consider risk assessments, hazards, and solubility of these thousands of different chemistries either, as it contains different chemistry classes. The definition should focus on specific chemistries of concern using clear and concise language. The EPA, for example, provides that approximately 600 PFAS are manufactured, including imported, and or used in the United States. Among these 600 substances in the solid fluoropolymers, liquid fluorotelmer alcohols, and gases, hydrofluorocarbon refrigerant forms. All of these are included in the definition as written. The fundamental physical, chemical, and biological properties of solids, liquids, and gases are clearly different from one another. Finally, I'd like to speak to the alternatives process that these measures imply. While there are alternatives for some applications, not all have applicable alternatives. And in some cases, not all alternatives have been thoroughly analyzed and reviewed by agencies. Washington State's Department of Ecology is going through this exact process. Could not find alternatives in performance and safety, in several cases in just food packaging, for example. These bills are being grouped together. I'm speaking to them as one. I look forward to working with the committee and bill sponsors individually as requested, and I'll be around for questions as well.
Thank you for your testimony. Our final testifier is Nichelle Williams-Johnson. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Chair Freiberg and members of the House Preventive Health Policy Committee, good morning. My name is Nichelle Williams-Johnson. I am a special educator and program manager at LDA Minnesota, a nonprofit organization filed under the name Learning Disabilities Association. I have been with LDA Minnesota for 4 years, and prior to that, I taught in general education and special education for 20 years. I am a parent and I care about the impact of toxic chemicals on communities of color. LDA Minnesota has been serving families and adults impacted by learning differences for 55 years across Minnesota. Approximately 13% of children in the US have a developmental disability. Thousands more have ADHD. In Minnesota, about 32,000 children have specific learning disabilities, and about 14% of students receive special education. The National Academy of Sciences Committee on Developmental Toxicology estimates that at least 28% of developmental defects are caused in whole or part by environmental exposure to toxic chemicals. These are preventable causes of these disabilities. PFAS chemicals can pose significantly health risk at extremely low exposure levels, particularly for pregnant women and children. Studies have linked PFAS to impaired fetal development as well as interfering with the thyroid and low birth rate, which can then affect children's brains. PFAS chemicals have no place in products children come in close contact with. House File 3571 will help reduce children's exposure to toxic PFAS. Since diet is a significant source of PFAS exposure, LDA also supports House File 2907 banning PFAS in cookware. On behalf of Minnesota's children, LDA Minnesota urges this committee to vote unanimously to pass the PFAS bills to better protect all families from PFAS chemicals. And I will be around to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you, Mr. Freiberg.
Thank you for your testimony. That concludes the testifiers who've signed up to testify on the issue of PFAS generally. We can take some time just to discuss for questions for testifiers on the issue of PFAS kind of in general before turning to the bills which deal with PFAS in specific product categories. Representative Heinzman.
Mr. Chair, did you say that we're only allowed at this point to ask question of testifiers? Is that correct?
You can also ask them of the bill authors. Sorry if I was not
Would you
clear on
prefer that we wait, Mr. Chair?
if you have questions in general, you're certainly welcome to ask them now. I mean, I would say if you have questions specific to certain types of products, it would make sense to wait until the bill dealing with those types of products is under consideration.
I do have some questions on products, but more specifically, I have questions on the language in Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn's bill. If you prefer I wait, that's fine, but I can ask now, whatever you like.
If it's specific to Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn's bill, that bill is first. So I think it might make sense to wait then. But you're welcome to ask a question now if you have a general question about PFAS.
Well, I have quite a few. No, I definitely don't have any general questions, but I do have some very specific ones. So I'll go ahead and wait, Mr. Chairman, and hopefully you allow time for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Heinzman. Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have general questions.
Sure.
And a quick comment. Thank goodness that there's an abbreviation and we don't have to say that all of the words that describe this group of chemicals. But thank you, Representative Wazlawik, for at least stating it once. So I'll go with PFAS as the pronunciation of it. And my question is for Ms. Williams-Johnson. And just to hear more in general about this link between all of these PFAS chemicals and learning disabilities. And, I'm assuming that, the younger that exposure is, then the more pronounced, and thank you for nodding your head. And that is my question is, Representative Wazlawik and I are on the early childhood. And so we are thinking all the time about that importance of that brain development prenatally, as well as in that first 1,000 days. And so thank you, Ms. Williams-Johnson. And can you talk in general about this group of chemicals and how they are impacting children?
Ms. Williams-Johnson.
Oh, thank you. This group of chemicals impact children in a great way. Unfortunately, a lot of parents don't know what type of chemicals are in certain products, especially if you're coming from a disproportionate low income community, where basically you will buy the less inexpensive products, especially, Dollar Tree is your friend. So when they do buy those chemicals and the children, the toys, and they play with them, they put them in their mouth, they don't understand that there are harmful chemicals in there. So what we see in our practice is that a lot of children have learning disabilities or delays in certain functions, motor skills, learning their alphabet, and speech delays are on the rise. So that's what we see due to the toxic chemicals in their environment, and parents, unfortunately, not knowing what these chemicals do to their child or to them, honestly.
Mhm.
I hope
Any-
I answer your question. Yeah.
Any follow-up, Representative Pryor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So no other members, Representative Morrison just raised her hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering, maybe this is for someone from the industry. I'm just wondering if there was explicit testing done of the toxicity of these chemicals before they were placed into widespread use.
Mr. Quillis or Mr. Swearingen? Mr. Swearingen, I see you turned your camera on.
I'll take it, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Representative. Yes, all these products are highly studied and reviewed by the EPA and FDA and applicable federal agencies before they go into market. For specific applications, I'm happy to research which studies would be applicable to whichever application and try and share those.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Representative Morrison?
No, I think that would be helpful if that information exists. Thanks.
Sure. If anything is provided, we can share it with the committee. Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the authors bringing the bills forward today. I do want to just follow up on what Mr. Swearingen just said with the offer of testing. I would be particularly interested to know what testing has been done on any products, PFAS products that are involved in carpeting. And if that's something you could look into and get back to us, I would really appreciate that. It seems like from what we've been talking about, PFAS is in so many products and so many areas of things we buy. And then listening to Ms. Jall's testimony that even just trying to authenticate whether PFAS are included or not is of grave concern to me. And I like Mr. Vetch's comment about, an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. That should be the mantra for this committee. So I would be interested in that. But I did have another question, which I'm not sure if we have anyone on the call who could answer it, but I'm just wondering what the costs are for cleanup of PFAS in Minnesota thus far, or if there's anybody on the call who might know what the cost of Minnesota taxpayers is for cleanup of PFAS issues. And if we don't have anyone, we should look into that as well.
Representative Wazlawik, is that something you might be familiar with?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't speak to specific cleanup costs. I don't think, maybe someone from the MPCA can talk more about that. But what I do know is there's been, the 3M settlement and some of the money that's come, a lot of that money has been used for water treatment in the East Metro. And that was, I believe that was $850 million settlement. There was some money that was used up in Bemidji for their water treatment issues that they had with PFAS. And then there's also, I believe there's a $12 million request in the in a bonding bill for the city of Andover to extend their water infrastructure because of PFAS. So I can speak to those specifics, but it does look like someone from MPCA is here.
Yeah.
Maybe they can provide more information.
Mr. Johnson, welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and then quickly provide an answer if you're able.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, my name is Tom Johnson. I'm the Government Relations Director for the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I am happy to get back to the committee with more specifics. I was also going to reference some of the items that Representative Wazlawik just referenced, including the city of Bemidji and the 3M settlement dollars. But happy to get more specifics back to the committee later.
Okay. Thank you. That would be great, and we can supply that. I'd like to turn to Representative Heinzman now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just something that came up in the previous discussion. One of the testifiers was the American Chemistry Council. And it was really interesting, Mr. Chair, because they brought out kind of a discussion on risk assessments that have been used to identify some of the more dangerous chemistries in the PFAS category. As you know, there's 5,000 of these formulations used, from everything, as we've heard, from cooking equipment to tents and waterproofing on clothing. I'm wondering if any of the testifiers have looked at data or research that could help the committee identify, and a lot of times we say this here at the Capitol or in committee and other places, where's the low hanging fruit? Are there, or has there been specific formulations that we need to be looking at more closely because of the health risk? And maybe somebody had mentioned something along those lines, but quite honestly, I don't recall hearing it. And just as we're talking today, I was wondering if maybe any of our testifiers could address that and direct the committee to sources of information that could help us better target our efforts, if that's possible.
Sure, Mr. Swearingen, I see you turned your camera on. Yeah, if you could quickly answer, please.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was turning it on just in preparation. So yes, so some of these regulatory agencies like the EPA and the FDA, they publish these researches, these studies on the toxicological and risk assessment hazards on these products before they go into market and even after they're in market. That'd be a good resource. And that's some of the studies I was referencing earlier. I know myself and some additional NGOs have some of these studies as well published, and happy to share those. For example, the long chain chemistry that was referenced earlier, that's been halted in production, United States, I can't remember how many tens of years now. But even though it's not produced anymore in the United States, it's still produced internationally, specifically probably in the Asian markets. None of this regulation that we're seeing here precludes or turns that off from being imported. And we'd certainly look and help to craft any language to stop that from coming into the United States in the market. Again, that's the long chain focus of PFAS.
Yeah, thank you. Any follow-up, Representative Heinzman?
I'd just be curious if there's others in the group also, obviously Sean is speaking to this, but if there's others too that are looking at that as they're bringing, as they're testifying before the committee. And I see there is one hand up, so I'd love to hear from, I think, Lydia.
Okay, Ms. Jall, very quickly, I would like to get to the bills in a few minutes. Ms. Yall, excuse me.
Thank you. So yeah, to answer the representative's question, I would say risk not only depends on the chemical, but it also depends on its usage. And all the bills today are products that have not only high risk, but because how they're used, for example, for children, cosmetics that are applied to the face, or cookware that your food is in direct contact with. But these uses are also not necessary. So perhaps there are uses of PFAS in, say, medical devices that might at this moment be necessary, but everything discussed today is unnecessary. Secondly, we're not seeing any of the legacy long chain chemistries in products in the United States today. And these have been shown for decades to be harmful. But what some of you might not know is that in wastewater treatment plants, the newer PFAS, the short chain ones that the chemical industry claims to be safe, even though research shows they are not. But even if you believe that only the long chain ones are unsafe, in wastewater treatment plants, the short chain chemicals transform into long chain chemicals like PFOA and PFOS. So that's another consideration that needs to be made.
Thank you. Representative Gruenhagen, you have your hand raised.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just have a question. I suppose Representative Wazlawik might respond. What is the dollar amount or fiscal notes that are in these? If we're passing these laws, what the agencies have funding to implement this, or can you just speak to that? Some of these bills have a fiscal note tied to them.
Yeah, we are not a fiscal committee, Representative Gruenhagen, and the motion will be to refer to these bills to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee where that issue can be addressed. But Representative Wazlawik, if you have a quick answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just direct you and the public to the fiscal notes where they lay out those costs. They're generally relatively, if I remember correctly, I think they're relatively similar across the three bills because the process is similar to what would be done, what's been being done right now with the PFAS and food packaging ban we passed last session.
Yeah, thank you. Any quick follow-up, Representative Gruenhagen?
Yeah, just one other. It just seems, according to what I've found, I checked out the federal PFAS roadmap. Again, I tend to agree with the Minnesota Chamber and the other comments. We're getting a little bit like the cart before the horse. The only other state I see is California addressing these. Representative Wazlawik, are there other states that are taking these blanket steps?
Quick response, Representative Wazlawik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, this isn't a blanket response. We're only banning the use of PFAS in specific products. Second, the state of Maine actually just passed a ban on PFAS and all non-essential uses of PFAS that goes into effect in 2030. So we are not the first state taking action, but two, it's important that as Minnesota, as a state, that we lead on this, that we don't wait for the feds, because as I mentioned in my testimony, it will take a long time to test all of the PFAS and have an idea of the toxicity and the issues with these chemicals. And so that's why we're using this approach is to do the preventative piece, so that we're not having to deal with the issues on the back end.
Thank you, Representative Wazlawik. I would like to turn to the bills. So the first one on the agenda is House File 3571. I will move that House File 3571 be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, could you briefly remind the committee which bill this is?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3571 is the PFAS ban in juvenile products, so baby products, etc.
Okay, members, is there any discussion to this bill? Representative Heinzman, I thought I'd wait a minute because I had a feeling you would have a question about this one.
Well, I did mention it earlier, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Grunhagen was kind of hitting on it in previous conversations. Representative, there was a little bit, we touched on the California language, and I'm not sure that previously you had known that the language in your bill is essentially a letter by letter, word by word copy of what California has done, except for the exclusions, or maybe there's a better word for it. The California language is it allows some room, because there are people, of course, that wind up in a situation where they unknowingly have a product that contains PFAS. And in your bill, you specifically do not allow for that. In the California language, the state has to prove that the manufacturer intended to put PFAS in that product. And in your language, you leave that out. And it makes me wonder, if that's something that you could look at, because there's certainly lots of examples, like I provided in the last committee, of people that are just trying to do the right thing, getting their businesses going, and they're in a spot now where they could be potentially looking under serious repercussions under 115.071, which I have open today because I feel like it's important to at least acknowledge that the language carries serious penalties for someone if MPCA decided to enforce the law. So if you could address some of those things that we previously discussed, and then also the issue that I'm raising today, and help the committee better understand what the reason is why that's being excluded for those that don't intentionally include PFAS in their product.
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Heinzman, for the question. I know that you have some very specific concerns, and they're definitely worth discussing again in front of this committee and for those in the public who might be tuning in today. So first of all, I think so in regards to the language in the California or the provision in the California law, my specific concern, and I guess potentially Mr. Johnson may be able to further discuss this, but the way that it works is like the parts per million sort of thing. Like there has to be a certain amount of threshold in each product to be actually able to
know that it's there. And so I am concerned about allowing a certain level of PFAS to be present in a product just so that we're able to test and see that it's there. So I think that because when we already know that these materials, these chemicals are forever chemicals, the ongoing exposure increases the amount that is in our bloodstreams, in our water, et cetera. I think that it just becomes a little bit of a slippery slope. So I definitely appreciate that. And that's kind of where my thoughts are from that perspective. And I did, after we chatted in environment, have a conversation specifically with MPCA about the infractions and enforcement. And I know Mr. Johnson will be able to speak to that, but I think that there was an opportunity recently for the legislature in one of the committees, potentially environment, to take action on a ingredient disclosure proposal. And I'm not sure if you voted for that or voted against it, but that I think would help small business owners be able to see that they might be purchasing something that contains PFAS before we would move toward like this ban, or if PFAS were to be removed from other products outside of what we're discussing here today.
Representative Heinzman, any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple actually. First, I just want to say, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, that both you and Representative Wazlawik deserve credit for putting a bill forward, and that draws all kinds of conversation. And I don't know that you framed it up as a starting point, but maybe that's one way that at least I could try to look at this and figure out, what are the options going forward? Because, and you didn't address my question necessarily, but if you could, that would be helpful, because I am hoping that there could be that provision, at least, as we're discussing it, because it's going to keep coming up, that same statutory limit to this kind of regulation, because there's plenty of people, and I used myself in the last committee as an example, that may have unknowingly coded their product, which I use the example of a little rocking horse that I was building, and when I was first starting my business for kids, that rocking horse was, obviously targeted for people that are targeted, and it's technically a juvenile product, right? So is that something you'd be open to, or are you saying you're not interested, you're ruling that out? That there should be, because near as I can tell, there should be an exclusion for people that include this accidentally, as opposed to in your language, because even in the California language, there's off ramps for people that do it accidentally, that include an amount of PFAS without intentionally doing so.
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Representative Heinzman, for kind of the additional clarity on that. I certainly wouldn't expect that you or fellow artisans would be purposely including these, these dangerous chemicals in any product that you're marketing toward children. I think that, should this bill be passed into law, and we are, working with the MPCA, they are continuing to notify people and educate them of this new bill, this new law, so that they are making products that are safe for the children of the state of Minnesota to use and to be around. I think it might be helpful for us to hear from Tom Johnson about the infractions and enforcements that have happened over the past number of years. It's a really low number. I think it's under 10, actually, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think that it's really important that we don't necessarily disregard the possibility that there are a few bad actors in the state. And so, kind of giving the MPCA the opportunity to have those conversations. I don't think that they've actually ever had to issue a fine in these conversations up to this point. So when somebody's being made aware that they have produced a product or manufactured a product that includes PFAS, I think that they've been able to come to an agreement and just stop doing it. So Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I would appreciate Mr. Johnson weighing in here.
Mr. Johnson, welcome back to the committee. Please briefly answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Yes, that is correct. Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, we have had 15 different instances of noncompliance with previous similar bans on hazardous chemicals in consumer products that would include flame retardants and or lead in children's toys or those types of materials. In each case, we have not had to get to the point of issuing a civil penalty. We have been able to work with each of those companies, which include a variety of both brick and mortar and online platforms to come to an agreement and get those products off the shelves. And in every case, our priority is to get products that are not in compliance off the shelves for the health of Minnesotans. So I hope that answers the question. Happy to follow up with individual legislators if they have any further questions on our enforcement.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Mr. Johnson. Representative Heinzman, final comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, could you help me understand the scope of that? What I would assume is some kind of process that MPCA has. So there's literally millions of products being sold in the state at any given moment. How many have you tested or worked to confirm whether or not they contain PFAS? Because when I hear your testimony, there's only 15 cases. I kind of wonder how much MPCA is actually doing in this subject area. And just a comment, I'm assuming since I don't get a follow-up question, Mr. Chair, I can make a comment. This language is incredibly broad and incredibly unforgiving. There are so many people trying to bring products to the market in small startup situations, like I mentioned, and otherwise. These people may or may not even be aware of this kind of law and be affected by this chapter 115.01 or 0.071 enforcement. And I hope that we would at least consider, which it sounds like the bill author is saying we will not, consider making an adjustment to this language so that those that are intentionally adding PFAS are the ones being affected specifically by the enforcement that is under that chapter that I just mentioned. California has done that in their language, and it just seems, it's shocking to me that if you're gonna write this bill, well, essentially copy this bill from what is in current statute in California and bring it to Minnesota, you would at least include language, as California did, to make sure they're going after the bad actors, because it looks like in this case, it's something other than that. So hopefully Mr. Johnson can give me an answer to my question and provide some scope, because I have a feeling that we haven't tested the millions of products across the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Heinzman. Representative Pryor, briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, for bringing this forward. Just briefly, my question is, I think we've had a great focus so far on this committee that we are trying to attack the low-hanging fruit, the products that are causing the most harm to health harms in the environment. And since this is the health committee, I think it is good that we keep focusing on preventive health part of that. So Kotyza-Witthuhn, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, could you talk a little bit about you as a parent? Is there any information that helps you understand what are the safe products that you would be choosing right now when you're buying a mattress and a cover to, waterproof cover, and all these other products that are listed? When you were shopping for these as a concerned parent, as an informed parent, is there any indication now? And then will this bill then really change that position?
Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. I think it's a really good question, because as I mentioned in my introduction, and maybe even to kind of piggyback a little bit off of Representative Heinzman's last comment about how so many, there are people, small business owners who are trying to enter their way into a market and are not doing so intentionally. There are right now parents all across the state of Minnesota, myself included, who are thinking that we're buying, maybe the highest quality bibs or car seat or high chair that we can find, but right now there isn't information. I mean, I'm willing to bet that most people don't even know what PFAS stands for. And again, you had mentioned gratitude to Representative Wazlawik earlier for pronouncing it for all of us, because we don't know what we don't know. And if there's no disclosure, if companies aren't required to say, hey, there's PFAS in this product, which again, I think was voted down by members of the minority in an earlier committee, which is unfortunate. There's really no action that we are requiring upstream from the manufacturers to take into the health, the public health of the children of the state of Minnesota. So I think we do need to take into consideration that the when we begin to value potentially the economy over public health, and I think that it can get really, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit of a slippery slope. So I think that these types of bills work to protect small businesses from this sort of chemical exposure, but really it's protecting the children of the state of Minnesota and our environment. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn. Representative Franson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the bill author, Representative Wazlawik. I actually like your bill. For years and years and years, I've been very conscious about the types of makeup that I personally wear and what I'm putting into my household. So I actually applaud you for bringing this bill forward. At least for me, I'm interested in having that discussion. I don't know if your bill actually
sorry to interrupt, Representative Franson, just so we're clear, we're on Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn's bill dealing with juvenile products.
Confusion going on today with so many bills. But anyway, okay, so just back to the PFAS. We'll just talk about the so the bills that are being brought forward, we'll just lump them all together then. I actually am appreciative of the conversation that we are having. I think it's very important for transparency about what is in our products, what those products can do. The cosmetic industry itself has formaldehyde in it, methyl glycol, which is another form of formaldehyde, mercury, other parabens, and all those. Some of them are hormone disruptors as well, things that we just don't know, right? But industry is adapting and moving forward. There are products out there that advertise to people saying that this is clean, this is healthy for you. There's a website called EWG, which I frequently, just to see exactly, is this safe for me? Is this safe for my family? But I am interested in the conversation. I won't be voting for your bill today because it's a little bit too broad and punishes those who may not be aware. And but I just wanted to, all three of you, or all these bills here, just applaud you for taking that conversation. But I honestly don't think it goes enough. I think we need to do more educating on the chemicals that are in our products, from everything we put on our face, wash our hair with, what's on our utensils, our bakeware, and even into what we put into our body as far as pharmaceutical products. So I want to thank you again, and thanks for the time today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Representative Franson. Representative Heinzman, I'll afford you one more brief comment because I know you've said this is the bill you care the most about, but I want to make sure we have time for the other three bills as well. So briefly, one follow-up question.
No, it's actually just previously I had asked a question and Tom Johnson from MPCA was going to address it, but I'm not sure, maybe he didn't get recognized by the chair, or maybe he didn't put his hand up. I'm not sure which, but if we could have a better understanding of the enforcement and the testing, so we know when we hear about only 15 actions being brought to MPCA's attention, what was the scope of that statewide with so many products that potentially could be affected, and only 15 actions? It would be great, I think, if the committee could understand what kind of effort MPCA is involved in identifying cases where this has been a problem.
Mr. Johnson, are you able to comment on that briefly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Heinzelman. Again, our enforcement over the years has been in conjunction with the Department of Commerce and the Department of Health as part of the Chemicals and Projects Interagency Team that I believe Mr. Quillis was had referenced previously. And so this is I will have to get back to you, Representative, about exactly how many products that we have tested over the years for the various laws that the legislature has passed on chemicals and harmful substances in products. But I can say that these would be identified as products that are likely to contain this type of hazardous chemical or hazardous substance, and then we would go and test that product to see if it does in fact contain that hazardous chemical or substance. So happy to get back to you, Representative, on more numbers and specifics, but that's a general idea.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. If you do get that information, please share it with our committee administrator and we can make sure it's shared with all the members of the committee. Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, do you have any closing remarks?
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment, if that's okay. Could I address that?
Sure, if it's quick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, I just want to suggest that, as the issue has come forward, I think this is the second or third time you've been prepared to answer and respond to the number of cases that have come forward to your agency. I hope that in committees coming forward that when this issue comes up, that you will have that information, because it does necessitate that we have the question itself, that we have some context for that action, because if we're looking at potentially thousands or more, depending on what legislation may or may not become law, it would be very important that we understand how big your effort may look like, and that could be a budgetary issue, and many other considerations need to be looked at going forward for your agency. So it would only stand to reason that you be prepared for that question next time.
Thank you, Representative Heinzelman. Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn, any closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, for another robust discussion today. I do think that it's really important, as Representative Franzen said, that we continue to educate the public about just what is going into the products that we use on an everyday basis. And this is certainly, this committee is doing some really great work in that aspect. So I look forward to supporting this, or your support of the bill, hopefully, and so that we are able to continue to do our best for protecting Minnesota's children and our environment down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn. With that, I will renew my motion that House File 3571 be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Freiberg, aye. Vice Chair Bierman.
Bierman, aye.
Bierman, aye. Representative Grunhagen.
No.
Grunhagen, nay. Representative Acom.
Aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Abaje.
Aye.
Abaje, aye. Representative Ackland.
Aye.
Ackland, aye. Representative Carlson.
Aye.
Carlson, aye. Representative Franzen.
No.
Franzen, nay. Representative Heinzman.
No.
Heinzman, nay. Representative Morrison.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. And Representative Pryor.
Aye.
Pryor, aye. Chair, you have 8 ayes and 3 nays.
There being 8 ayes and 3 nays, the motion prevails. The bill is re-referred. Thank you, Representative Kotyza-Witthuhn. Representative Wazlawik, the first bill of yours that we have is House File 2906. This is the bill dealing with cosmetics. So I will move that House File 2906 be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. Representative Wazlawik, I understand you also have the A1 amendment. Would you like me to move that amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I will move the A1 amendment to get the bill in the form the author would like. Would you like to briefly describe the amendment, Representative Wazlawik?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. The A1 amendment moves the implementation date back 1 year. So this is in response to concerns heard from members of previous committees to try and make that the process a little bit longer so that MPCA can do all the outreach and education necessary before the ban goes into place to make sure that people know that this exists and what products they might have to take off their shelves. So that's the amendment.
Thank you. All those in favor of the A1 amendment, please respond by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the amendment is adopted. Did you, the bill is in the form you would like? Did you, as I mentioned, this is the bill dealing with cosmetics, Representative Wazlawik. Did you have any comments specific to this bill?
Just want to thank the committee for taking time to hear the bill. I think testimony earlier, sort of my testimony and others who talked specifically about the cosmetics piece, I think it's pretty clear that these cosmetics are coming into contact with our eyes and our lips and our faces, and there's a really high risk of PFAS becoming into contact with our bodies and getting in our bloodstream and staying there. So hope the committee can support this bill moving forward. I do also just want to say that there are other options for these chemical or these cosmetics that contain these chemicals. So those options do exist for folks who are interested. But to Representative Franson's point, we don't actually know that PFAS are in a lot of our cosmetics because they're not required to label them, and there's no disclosure required. So it is a big concern. I think folks want to know they're in that and don't want to be using these products. So I hope we can move the bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wazlawik. Is there any discussion specific to this bill? Okay, not seeing any. Representative Wazlawik, any closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to, this is kind of weird because we're hearing the bills separately, but I did just want to throw out some comments there regarding the testing of these products. I think it's important to note that the industry themselves, at least from what I heard from the testifier, isn't testing these products. They're relying on government agencies who are oftentimes understaffed and under-resourced to do that. And I do want to point out that these agencies are continuing to test products and different PFAS chemicals and are finding health impacts, the FDA and the EPA both. So in terms of how these things all align, this is more broad comments to all three bills, but just wanted to point that out before we move on.
Thank you, Representative Wazlawik. With that, I will renew the motion that House File 2906 as amended be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Freiberg, aye. Vice Chair Bierman.
Bierman, aye.
Bierman, aye. Representative Gruenhagen.
No.
Gruenhagen, nay. Representative Acom.
Aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Abaje.
Aye.
Abaje, aye. Representative Ackland.
Aye.
Ackland, aye. Representative Carlson.
Aye.
Carlson, aye. Representative Franzen.
No.
Franzen, nay. Representative Heinzman.
No.
Heinzman, nay. Representative Morrison.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. Representative Pryor.
Aye.
Pryor, aye. Chair, you have 8 ayes and 3 nays.
Okay, there being 8 ayes and 3 nays, the bill is re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee as amended. The next bill on the agenda is House File 2907, Representative Wazlawik's bill dealing with PFAS in cookware. I will move that House File 2907 be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. Would you like me also to move the A2 amendment to that bill, Representative Wazlawik? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I will move the A2 amendment to get the bill in the form the author would like it considered. Is this a similar amendment, Representative Wazlawik, pushing out the implementation year?
Yep, it's moving it out by 1 year.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. Okay, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. The bill is in the shape you would like. Do you have any comments specific to the issue of cookware, Representative Wazlawik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PFAS is bad. It shouldn't be in our cookware. Please vote yes.
Okay, thank you, Representative Wazlawik. We do have a couple questions on this one. Representative Pryor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think necessarily, Representative Wazlawik, you have an answer to this, but I'm wondering about the secondhand market. The wedding present, long time ago, yes, it had PFAS in it. And right now I just have it stored in my basement because I'm afraid that if I gave it to someone else, they would use it and expose themselves. So is there a monitoring of what's happening in used thrift stores and things like that.
Representative Wazlawik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The bill language doesn't apply to the sale or resale of used products. So if there is a used product that is out there, that this isn't necessarily about individuals themselves donating or giving a product. It's more about the sale of these products in the market.
Thank you, Representative Wazlawik. Representative Heinzman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Wazlawik, we've had a long ongoing conversation about this, and I'm just going to keep bringing it up because I think it matters. Each of your bills continues to have the enforcement that folks find objectionable at virtually every level. And I brought up with Mr. Johnson the lack of scope when the majority has pointed out that this rarely happens, so on and so forth. But as I read the chapter relative to enforcement and the potential for fines, civil penalties, criminal penalties, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. And I'm going to point that out, as well as point out that here we are again going drastically further than even California. They have, at least the information that I'm reading, that they have a labeling requirement. But Representative Wazlawik, you want, in addition to so many other things, an enforcement element to this. And Minnesotans are tired of more and more and more regulatory, I don't know how to describe it, legislation with these the potential for huge fines, criminal penalties, civil penalties that they may or may not be subject to, depending on, I honestly don't know. It really hasn't been laid out for us. And so many people are potentially going to be guilty of something without even knowing it. And we're supposed to just, I guess, hope that everything is going to be okay. I don't understand. It seems like this would be a good opportunity to start talking more about what are other states doing? How is it effective? And what can we do to lead the way on this in a way that doesn't go after people punitively, criminally, civilly in every single one of your bills? So I guess if we could, just to get to the question again, because I really don't believe it has been fully answered, is there a chance that the enforcement side of this could be looked at and this could potentially move forward? Because as I'm looking at the Senate and what they're doing, this is going nowhere. I want to work on this issue, and I've said it over and over again. I'm sure it's getting repetitive and I'm bothering the chair every time I bring it up, but we have the same goals. We recognize, Republicans and Democrats, that PFAS is bad. Just saying that in the opening of the bill as an introduction isn't telling anybody something we don't already know. PFAS is bad. Let's figure this out together. This effort feels very partisan. And if you could address this enforcement issue, I'd really appreciate it.
Representative Wazlawik, any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will point out that this is the same enforcement language that passed in the food packaging ban last session, and I didn't hear these concerns then. So I'm just sort of curious why they're coming up now and why there's so much opposition, because it's the same language. Other than that, I will say, as Tom Johnson from the MPCA said, they're not out to get people. They don't have spies that are trouncing around the state looking to get small business owners on this. They do a lot of outreach and a lot of education with businesses that may be impacted. That's actually, if you look at the fiscal note, they want to be doing that work in the lead up to the implementation date, so that they have time for folks to get the outreach and the education done, so folks can get these items off their shelves. That's also a reason why we pushed back the implementation date by a year, to give them additional time to have those conversations and really work to get those products off the shelves. And I do want to note that the language is an up to amount. So for all these fines and penalties, it's an up to amount. And as Mr. Johnson said, they're very unlikely to actually pursue that because their goal is to get products off the shelves to ensure that these chemicals are no longer being used in these products and being harmful to the environment and human health.
Thank you, Representative Wazlawik. Representative Heinzman, follow up, and then we are going to vote.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. For those watching at home, there is so much resistance to working with the minority and frankly, the majority in the Senate on this issue. It's really difficult to understand why. And as per, as into the violation limits, it's 10,000 per day and up to 25,000 per day cumulatively. Those aren't small numbers. And, at what point does someone intervene and say, you know what, we're going to target this issue around the state and we're going to go after people and make sure that the law is enforced. So maybe the law isn't currently being enforced today. And, Mr. Johnson wasn't able to actually give us an idea what the scope of their effort on this issue has been. And the additional comment that I'm going to make is Representative Wazlawik, just because you don't recall any opposition to these penalties doesn't mean that our concern wasn't made clear. Maybe you didn't hear it, Representative, but we certainly did address it and will continue to address it. Hopefully our concerns are heard this time, especially as we are moving this language forward, potentially here in the House. It's not going anywhere in the Senate, but there does need to be a bipartisan effort, and that's something that has to be part of that conversation. And so far, it's just been zero interest in working together on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Wazlawik, any closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually did make changes to the bill based on feedback. Representative Ackland had reached out to me. I think she expressed in committee concerns with the date, and I had further conversation with her to get amendments drafted to move that date back. I'll also say that Senate Republicans voted in support of this enforcement language when the food packaging bill passed. So I don't know why the resistance is coming up. I don't know why it's different with this bill, but as I said, it's a good bill. We need to move forward on this issue, and I hope members can support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wazlawik. I will renew my motion that House File 2907 as amended be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Freiberg, aye. Vice Chair Bierman.
Bierman, aye.
Bierman, aye. Representative Gruenhagen.
No.
Gruenhagen, nay. Representative Acom.
Aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Abaje.
Aye.
Abaje, aye. Representative Ackland.
Aye.
Ackland, aye. Representative Carlson.
Aye.
Carlson, aye. Representative Franzen.
Franzen, no.
Franzen, nay. Representative Heinzman.
No.
Heinzman, nay. Representative Morrison.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. Representative Pryor.
Pryor, aye.
Pryor, aye. Chair, you have 8 ayes and 3 nays.
Okay. There being 8 ayes and 3 nays, House File 2907 as amended is re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. Finally, we have House File 2952 dealing with PFAS in ski wax. I will move that House File 2952 be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. We also have an A1 amendment. Is that the same amendment pushing out the implementation date, Representative Wazlawik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that is what the amendment does.
Yes. I will move the A1 amendment. Is there any discussion to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. Okay, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. The bill is in the shape you would like. Did you have any comments specific to this bill, Representative Wazlawik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is in line with the other bills here today that are trying to work on the prevention first approach. And so this is another effort in Minnesota. Lots of people ski. Therefore, lots of people use ski wax. And we know that the PFAS can get into the soil and into the groundwater and into drinking water and cause problems. So just want to, again, point out that this is a prevention piece, and hope that members can support it.
Okay, thank you. Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked this question in the previous committee when this was heard. I'll ask again since it was a little over a week ago, I think. Just checking on what is the status previously. As I had looked at it before, there was no Senate author. Where is it today?
Representative Wazlawik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me pull it up and see. I believe that Representative McEwen is carrying it, or she was going to. Let me see if I can find that out. Yep, it does have a Senate companion, and Representative McEwen is carrying it in the Senate.
Okay. Representative Heinzman, follow up.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to know that this bill actually does have a Senate author now. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no additional members with questions, any closing remarks, Representative Wazlawik?
PFAS is bad, and I want to do something about it. So I'm proposing this bill to do that. Please support it. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I will renew my motion that House File 2952 as amended be recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Freiberg, aye. Vice Chair Bierman.
Bierman, aye.
Bierman, aye. Representative Gruenhagen.
No.
Gruenhagen, nay. Representative Acom.
Aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Abaje.
Aye.
Abaje, aye. Representative Ackland.
Aye.
Ackland, aye. Representative Carlson.
Aye.
Carlson, aye. Representative Franzen. Representative Franzen. Representative Heinzman.
Branson, no. I said it twice. No.
Oh, thank you. Representative Heinzman.
No.
Heinzman, nay. Representative Morrison.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. Representative Pryor.
Pryor, aye.
Pryor, aye. Chair, you have 8 ayes and 3 nays.
There being 8 ayes and 3 nays, the motion prevails, and House File 2952 as amended is recommended to be re-referred to the Health, Finance, and Policy Committee. That concludes the business for today. Thank you, Representative Wazlawik, for presenting your bills. Thank you to all the testifiers for presenting your information. Seeing no questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned.